Hey everybody, welcome to the live stream. We're doing it again, and I'm going to do kind of what I did last week, which is we did sort of half, I did half on the Arachnid warrior from Starship Troopers, and half on my Lynx spider. So I'm thinking about doing the same thing tonight. Gonna mix it up a little bit. And of course, feel free to ask questions. Let me just get my reference up here. For the Arachnid warrior. From the classic film Starship Troopers. So just been kind of having fun with this, and here's kind of where I'm at right now. So I think what I want to do is maybe work on this section. Actually, no, I want to work on these guys just for fun. And as I mentioned in the previous live streams, seems like every version of the reference that I got here that I've collected online is a little bit different. So I'm picking and chooses what I like from each of these. This is one, I believe this is, let's see if we can find the credit on here. I think this is the one from the Dope Pope. I like the serrated edge here. It's kind of mantis-like. So I'm going to kind of borrow that. You can see kind of different versions of it. This one's not so extreme. This one's a bit more extreme. And then if we look at the original from the movie, we don't really see much of a serrated edge. It's almost like painted on there. It's not really as extreme. And that's from the movie. I believe this is from the movie. Again, these images, I just did a Google search and grabbed a bunch. So, and I apologize to those that are not getting proper credit because of this, but I'm trying to do the best I can. So this one, Dope Pope. And I've borrowed a few from this design. Hopefully he takes it as flattery. I like this design for the face right here. And also the intersection right there where it meets the body, I think is pretty cool. So I'm going to kind of borrow that. And I like the kind of bulbous end right here. So let's work on these guys for a little bit. And for this one, I have kind of this kind of scheme right here. So here it's kind of like tissue coming out. But here I have the actual like coccyx, so this would be something closer to what you'd actually see in an arachnid. Small piece right here before it goes to the femur, and then sometimes you'd see like a patella right here. In this case, I have just kind of soft tissue between these two parts of the exoskeleton. So, you know, artistic liberties. So this one, I believe, still in a Dynamesh state. So maybe what I'll do is let's up the resolution a little bit for the Dynamesh. Keep those groups. Make sure that we don't have any masks on here. Interesting. Okay, why is it? Doing Dynamesh on just this part and not this part, but I don't have any masks on here, so that's kind of strange. Let's do this. Do a quick sear mesh. There we go. And then a Dynamesh. That kind of fixed it. Not sure what was going on there, but it's not a problem anymore. So I'm going to use, I'm going to make sure my mask by polygroups is all the way up to 100. That way, since each of these are different polygroups, I can sculpt on one part without bothering the others. And I'm going to do something like this. I like how this is coming out here. I might imitate that a little bit. And then I'm going to go to this. Just do a quick mask right here. Invert that mask and this kind of thing. Use clay tubes with low Z intensity. And I'm just kind of shaping it with the clay tubes brush here. Kind of like very coarse sandpaper, or, you know, sculpting tool, obviously. Let's do a little bit of a hollow here so that we can put some connective tissue in between the two parts of the exoskeleton. And I'm going to play with the silhouette here, just this one part. Just to get more of an angle there, because I think that helps to make it look a bit more aggressive. And I'm using the H polish brush here, just to kind of smooth it out a little bit, but I don't want it to be too smooth. Just go over down to this part and start kind of sculpting just the area where these two sections meet. I'm leaving the little gap right here for now. I'll fill that in with some geometry a little bit later. Just once I'm happy with the way these things are made, because I'm kind of experimenting right now. I'm not exactly sure if this is the way I want to go, but you know, Only one way to find out is to do it. We are starting with my take on the Arachnid from Starship Troopers, this guy. So I've been shaping this for the past couple sessions, and right now I'm starting to just work out the forms a little bit more and borrowing from various different versions that I've found online to see which ones I like the best. And then I also have my link spider loaded up, so I might work on that a little bit later on as well, just kind of depending on where we're feeling or what we're feeling. I like the bulbous part right here, so I'm going to bring that in. Makes it look a little bit muscular. Also gets that kind of S curve going, which I think is kind of cool. I'll leave this gap for now. And right now I have the model, this part of the model in sort of a Dynamesh kind of phase. I'm just kind of sketching out, seeing what I like in terms of the design, and going kind of loose and fast and not being super precise. I can save that for later. Go over to this part, and let me see, what is it looking at? Oh, I kind of like these zigzags here, so I'm going to bring that, let's bring that in here. That I think is a bit more sci-fi, but it's cool, so let's do it. Let's see, I think I like how this is going. This is going a little bit too far this way. And, you know, some of this wobbliness will be cleaned up when I get over to the ZBrush phase. Yeah, sure. I've been in the industry for about 20 years. I started out doing scientific illustration, went to Hollywood in 2005. In terms of movies, probably the biggest ones I've worked on are 10 Cloverfield Lane. I did the monster at the very end of that. Spoiler alert, there's the monster at the very end of it. I worked on Star Trek Beyond. I did some environments, some robot models for that. One little bug that was only on the screen for a few seconds. I worked on a lot of commercial stuff, film titles, television stuff, planetarium shows, lots of scientific illustration, animation. I've worked on models they've been 3D printed for museums, accurate models of insects, arthropods, and whatnot. I've done a lot of jewelry stuff and, you know, things like that. Did a lot of models for the opening titles of things like the John Wick series, and I got the Emmy nomination for my work on the opening title sequence for Wednesday, season 1. And I was very excited about that. I was very proud of that. Then I got a couple bugs in there too, which is nice. Stuff like that. Or to Bad Robot, Imaginary Forces, Prologue Films, Filmograph, Digizyme, Griffith Observatory, stuff I can't remember, dumb stuff nobody cares about, you know, typical freelancer Hollywood stuff, you know, industry stuff. The stuff I'm most excited about or proud of is actually more the scientific illustration, because I think that's kind of more interesting and a bigger challenge. It's just sometimes it can be frustrating because the work is very slow, and I like the fast pace of Hollywood stuff, but sometimes the Hollywood stuff can get a bit too brainless, which can be annoying. Yeah, I'm still doing that. I'm working on Starship Troopers, and also they're going to do the Link Spider as well. I did a really cool project a few years ago. Well, it was cool at the time, but unfortunately it didn't reach its full potential. But it was basically a digital biology textbook that was commissioned by Apple for the iPad when the iPad first came out. And Steve Jobs really wanted to do... he wanted to replace the textbook with the iPad. At the time, it seemed like a really good idea. Nowadays, I don't know. Technology in school has not exactly gone the way that we would hope it had gone. But regardless, at the time, it was really cool because it's a complete digital animated biology textbook, kind of thing that sci-fi authors used to fantasize about back when sci-fi authors did utopias instead of dystopias. So did a lot of animations, and the cool thing about that is it was written, the primary author on the textbook series was E.O. Wilson, who's a famous ant scientist. I don't know why I'm wearing headphones, I'm not listening to anything. And that was really, really cool because I got to do just a wide variety of things, and it was cool working with E.O. Wilson. But unfortunately, Steve Jobs died, and Tim Apple, the guy who took over Apple, it's amazing that his name was Tim Apple. How lucky is that? The guy who took over Apple, Tim Cook, wasn't really excited about the biology textbook project. He was more excited about making accessories for the iPhone and making lots of money that way. So the textbook didn't really go anywhere, but it was fun to work on, and I learned a lot. And then, of course, there was also the planetarium show that I did from 2018 to 2020. Worked on that Griffith Observatory. So if you're in LA, go check it out. It's called Signs of Life. It is a cool project because I got to work with a bunch of astronomers, but I was like doing most of the biology stuff. Not all of it, but most of it. And it was just super fun because, you know, this is one of those rare projects where you really get to do creative input. And, but also it was like animating, you know, I was a generalist. So I did sculpting, I did rigging, I did modeling, I did animation. And then on top of it, it was done for a dome. So we had to render it out for a dome. So it was 60 frames per second, and it was 8K renders rendered in Arnold. And it was 30 minutes of CG. So that's a lot of frames. So we had to build our own render farm. I didn't build it because I'm a ZBrush guy, not a IT guy. But it was really fun because we worked in this little lab that was right next to the LA Zoo in this unassuming little warehouse thing, mobile structure. And we actually had a portable mini planetarium dome inside the studio so that when we did dailies, we would go and actually sit in the little dome on like little lawn chairs and watch our work. And then when we needed to see proof of the more final shots, we'd actually drive up to the planetarium on the days it was closed and sit in the planetarium and watch our work on the 8K dome. That was really cool. Yeah, they didn't actually scrap the biology textbook. It actually did come out, but it just wasn't promoted. And the big problem is we also made it right when the iPad came out, and we made it so big because it was like 12 volumes that to have the entire textbook on the iPad, you'd have to get rid of everything else. So that kind of didn't work. So it was an experiment. But the biggest problem wasn't necessarily with the textbook itself. The biggest problem was that LAUSD, which is the school district for Los Angeles, decided that it was going to experiment by giving all the kids iPads. And they spent so much money on it that they didn't spend money on the teachers. And that was a real problem, and one that I'm kind of sympathetic to, because teachers are the most important part of the school, right? So that was kind of a fiasco, and it got a lot of bad press, and it kind of soured everybody on the whole concept of doing iPad for a textbook. And now, of course, in hindsight, we see that too much screen time can really be damaging for kids, especially in school. And it's really hard to monitor what they're actually looking at on the iPads. So it didn't quite work out, you know, but it was a worthwhile experiment at the time. I think the content that we did was really excellent, though, because it was all top-notch biologists working on it. It gave me a real appreciation for what goes into actually writing a good textbook. It's like you need people to teach. Yeah, I think so. I think that is, you know, it's like, yeah, I'm very pro-teacher. I think they get a bad rap. I had good teachers, but, you know, I'm Gen X, so I went to school back in the day when the students did something wrong, and I did a lot of stuff wrong, everyone would blame the students. Nowadays, everybody blames the teacher, which is really strange, because I did really stupid stuff, and I did it quite intentionally because I enjoyed being a pain in the ass, which I appreciate now being a student more. Anyways, but yeah, it's like I think, I don't know if we've figured out a way to really blend technology with the school well enough. It's really hard to sort of make sure that students are, you know, these days, of course, with like TikTok and that kind of stuff and YouTube and everything, it's much harder to monitor what the students are actually looking at. So, anyways, okay, so it's kind of evolved pretty quickly. I like where this is going now. This is looking more interesting. Of course, I think, I've changed this significantly. It's probably going to affect how I might make some changes in the legs here based on that, because I like this kind of thing right here. So maybe I'll bring that back into the legs. I'm stealing it from right here, and there's some other cool things, aspects here that I can, I like to do these kinds of large sort of striations, kind of like they've done right here. Let me do that again. It gives kind of a nice flow and also a nice structure to the segments, and it kind of also accentuates that kind of S curve that's going on here. So I like that. It's like the muscles are on the inside of the exoskeleton, so it's nice to kind of accentuate them without making them look like this is the actual muscle. I mean, the pet peeve I have with a lot of sci-fi insectoid designs is they mix the muscles and the exoskeletons a bit too much for my taste. Depends on the alien. If it's supposed to be some kind of hybrid, I guess you can get away with that. But if somebody says this is supposed to be an insect model, and then you see these bulging muscles all over it, I'm like, well, it should be on the inside of the exoskeleton technically. But I think doing this kind of stuff where you have these kinds of lines here and bulges to kind of imply that there's something inside there, I think that's kind of cool. Okay, so I'm going to go over here and kind of, I don't know if I can't see that joint right there. Can't see it right there though. I had my 8th grade biology teacher, I doubt he's around anymore in this plane of existence or whatever. This Mr. Shaun. And I wouldn't say he's my favorite teacher either, but he was a good teacher. And he was really just a super nerdy dude, as a biology teacher should be. I remember he really enjoyed talking about bird poop and how you could tell what time of year it was by the color of the bird poop. I'm kind of playing with this kind of thing. Mr. Shaun could do it, but I don't know if I could do it. I'm not an ornithologist, so I don't know enough about birds to tell you, but I can usually look at the sky or at the calendar and tell you what time of year it is. Like many people. I guess it makes sense, though, if you're, depends on what the birds are eating, which bugs are out. Bugs are out are probably dependent on what plants are in bloom, and what plants are in bloom are probably dependent on what time of year it is, so it makes sense. But I haven't spent as much time looking at bird poop. Okay, so let's do that like this. Pull this down a little bit. By the way, just to do a quick self-plug, I have been releasing new videos on my YouTube channel. It's bloopatone. So I've been doing it once a week for the past month, so I got about 4 up there. Just real quick ZBrush tips, things that I love about ZBrush. maybe there's a lot of tools in ZBrush. It's like I've done a lot of beta testing over the years for ZBrush. One of my favorite things to do. It's always nice when you get invited, and it's kind of an honor. And I'm friends with Paul Gabriel and a lot of those guys, so I've known them for a long time. But it's always funny, because we do the beta testing, and then they announce, you learn the new tools that are coming out, and it's very exciting. And then when the new version comes out, you get all excited about the new tools, and you use them for a while. And then as time goes on, you start getting jobs, and you don't have as much time to experiment. You just have to knock things out. And whenever you have to knock something out, you tend to rely on your tried and true practices because you know they're going to work. And what happens is that you gradually start to forget about those new tools that you just learned about and you were so excited about. And so there's a lot of stuff in ZBrush that we all tend to sort of, with the exception of Paul Gabriel, we all tend to forget about, or Joseph Trust, or Ian Robinson, because any of the guys that work at Pixelogic had the luxury of, Maxon, had the luxury of constantly being reminded what's in the program. The rest of us, we all forget, and I've seen this happen before where it's other users. We're in a meeting or something, and Paul or we're watching a video, one of Paul's videos, or live stream, and he starts bringing up this tool, and everybody's just like, has this collective, is like, oh, I forgot all about that, or I didn't even know that was part of ZBrush. There's just so many things in ZBrush that are easy to forget about, or maybe you just missed it when they released it. So I'm trying to do videos that kind of remind us of those really cool tools just here and there in the interface that can be useful. Yesterday I found out you can paint everything in one color with Subtool Master, fill instead of going one by one if you want one material for color. Yeah, it's a great one. Subtool Master is one I always forget about. It's a great plugin. Sorry, that's Scale Master, Subtool Master. You can go in here and do, fill? I'll just open up the little interface right here. Got a lot of folder actions here. Yeah, this one right here, you can fill all the subtools with the color at the same time, which is really nice. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. There's a whole bunch of stuff in here that I always forget about. I guess I got to do something before. No, just fill all these. Color. Okay. I just filled everything with white, so it doesn't look any different. This is a blue material. The video I did today was on micro mesh, which is a really cool one if you're doing. So I was doing a chandelier recently for another project that obviously not many bugs in that project. And I wanted to create chains real quick, and micro mesh is a great way to create chains. It's super easy to use. The problem is that the name of it sounds just like nanomesh or micropoly. But there's also micromesh and there's nanomesh. There was the interesting thing about the ZBrush manual. I've actually written several books on ZBrush back in the day. And very early on in my career, we're talking about ZBrush, I think it was ZBrush 3, or maybe even before ZBrush 3 came out. Pixelogic hired me to go through the entire manual and edit it, because I had, written Maya books and articles and stuff like that, so they wanted me to do that. And at the time, the ZBrush manual was literally just a wiki. It was just thrown together by users of ZBrush, and it was just this mess of a web page. So I went through every single web page and edited it and got it down into a usable fashion. So that taught me a lot about ZBrush back then. It also helped me because, I was writing a book, and so that helped me really get familiar with all the stuff we forget about, even the 2.5D tools and stuff like that. At the moment, there is documentation on Maxon website, which is very good. And they combine sort of videos. And they also used to have the Z Classroom, which I did a bunch of videos for the Z Classroom as well, way back when. Those are really old, though. So that would be the manual. Ryan Darling has a new book coming out. He's a ZBrush, I believe he's a live streamer, but he's been a ZBrush user for a really super long time. He asked me to help him out with a book, but I wasn't able to because I was too busy with moving and other stuff to help him. But he's has it coming out in November, and he has a lot of people working on it, like Jared Kuchevsky and Ian Robertson and Paul Gabriel and stuff, and that's going to be a good book to have if you like the good old paper manuals. But I don't think that there's a manual like in the good old days. But I think that's true for a lot of software. They tend to just use online HTML documentation now. I worked at Otoy for a while. They're the ones that make Octane, and so I did a lot of documentation for them, editing it and doing videos and that kind of thing. So it's it's not the most interesting work in the world, but the nice thing about it is it teaches you a lot about the software. In some cases, how much you don't know or how much you forget about the software. So I'm definitely playing around here and experimenting. So we're going into my own design here, just trying to, these pinchy things, how they're going to fit right here. I have seen this on insects before, where you have parts that kind of fit into like little slots here. So I'm going to kind of play with that idea with these little spikies. So if these parts come close together, they don't conflict with each other. And then I'm going to add some additional geometry here for the soft tissue in between. So I'm going to make a gap. Yeah, I think if you look at the, if you go, let's save this real quick. Yeah, it's online documentation. And then there's ZClassroom, ZBrush Live. That's the document. That's what the manual looks like. Problem with software development is the documentation is usually the last priority, because they're trying to get the software out and get it functional and reduce bugs as quickly as possible. And so it's only after they get the bugs worked out that they spend time in the documentation. So it's almost always out of date, and it's a really thankless task putting it together. And most software companies rely on users to sort of create the documentation online these days, whether it's YouTube videos or things like this. That's a bit more, live stream. That's a bit more economical than putting a whole lot of money in writing the documentation, because it goes out of date so incredibly quickly every time there's an update. If you've ever read through the Maya documentation, but well, man, that's not a fun one. It's so incredibly confusing, and the links go all over the place. And sometimes there's like tutorials built into the documentation. Sometimes there's not. And then they have links to videos on the Autodesk website. This is the Maya documentation I'm talking about. And the videos, they kind of they start a series and then they stop and somebody else takes it over, and it's like completely out of date. It's just no fun. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I want to speed this up a little bit because I want to get to the serrated edges here. And it's looking pretty. It's looking nice and grizzly now, which is cool. And so you can kind of see that a lot of times what I'll do is I'll draw in a deep line right here, maybe carving in or maybe pulling out, and then I'll use the clay tubes to kind of round it out so it doesn't look just like a line drawn into it. That's something I learned from Tomas Wittelsbach, who does a lot of jewelry sculpting. That's his main thing, is to avoid making things that look just like drawn on lines. And so it's fine to kind of score it so that you can get the position of the groove, but then going over it and sculpting with brushes. With the sculpting brushes like a clay tubes or something like that, you can start defining forms rather than just drawing out like contour lines. And I found that that's kind of helped my sculpting a lot, taking that advice. You know, if you're doing like hard surface, you're doing parting lines, you might approach it a different way. But for organic stuff, that's kind of how I do it. I like finding these little bulges and these forms in here. That's why I'm not really going too literal with my reference here, because I want to kind of explore and find these things on my own. If Paul Verhoeven has a problem, he can always contact me. But I doubt it. What I'm going to do right here is save this real quick. We get the old snake hook brush. Yes, thank you. Turn on Sculptress. And just pull out my grizzly teeth here. Very kind of a mantis-like thing to have. And I'm going to turn off. I use Sculptress every once in a while for just stuff like that. But I tend to use Dynamesh more. It's just a personal preference. I think it was Amy Ash likes to, not Amy Ash, sorry, Ashley Amy Adams. Amy Adams, no. There's a ZBrush artist named Amy Ash, and there's a ZBrush artist named Ashley Adams. They're both great. I get them confused. Ashley Adams does live stream. I think she uses Sculptress a lot, like as her main sculpting tool. So it's kind of interesting approach. Different from the way I work, but definitely cool. Works really well for her. Should give it a try at some point. It's hard to break some habits though once you get a way of working. So I'm going to sharpen these guys in a moment. At the moment they look a little doofy. And they're kind of like ticklers. Yeah, I watch her restream sometimes. I forget where she's at. I'm in Europe, so I think she's in a very different time zone than me. Amy Adams, I don't know about what her ZBrush work is like. Oh, the other thing, somebody was asking me earlier about the stuff that I've worked on. The other thing that I worked on that's kind of fun, but I keep forgetting that I did it, is I've been working on the Netflix, the logos for One Piece, which is really, I forget I'm doing it because it's really just just the logos here and there, just the 3D parts. But it's still kind of fun because it's a cool show. And my brother is a huge One Piece fan. And it's really popular here in France as well. It's fun doing little goofy little skulls and stuff. Okay, these wobblies right here are going to be easier to get rid of once I do a ZRemesh. Okay, I can always take the H polish brush, but it's still going to be, as long as I'm in Dynamesh mode, it's going to be hard to eliminate it entirely. So what I think I'll do is, since I'm getting to that point where I usually start thinking about ZRemesh, maybe I'll do that in a moment. I think I got most of the major forms worked out. I'm making this kind of angular. I don't know if I like that or not. Again, I want to make sure that I have enough range of motion here so this can actually move. Seen this kind of stuff on ants, like Ponoran ants, the what am I thinking of? With the crazy jaws. You know what I'm talking about. Leaf cutters. Those are not Ponorans, it's Acromyrmex. A lot of like crazy spikies all over them. Let's pull one up just for fun. Let's save this real quick. So this is an old model that I did a long time ago, but it's still one of my favorites because I just love this ant. You can see how incredibly spiky these guys get. Just all over the place. These things are just absolutely nuts. And then of course they have the jaws that are made for cutting through leaves. So this is, soldier. With this species of ants, even within a colony, you'll have other workers that are like a fraction of the size, and they'll ride on the back of these guys and fight off the ant decapitating flies and all that kind of stuff. These guys are really cool. Definitely very inspiring. Just looking at that for inspiration as I go through some of these spiky bits on this leg or these arms here. So I think what I'll do now is I'm going to insert my little connective tissue here and then do a Z-remesh. So for the connective tissue, I'm going to use insert mesh brush. Yeah, the leaf cutters are definitely one of the most fascinating ants. Worth reading about, because they're one of those ants where they have these massive colonies, and there's a lot of diversity within the colony. It's very specialized. So you have like those big workers, and then you have the smaller ones that are meant to sort of help guard the workers while they cut the parts of the leaf. And of course, why do they cut the leaves? They cut the leaves and they bring the chunks of the leaf back to the nest. You guys have probably seen footage of this. And then they take the leaf into the nest. They mash them up with their mandibles. Another class of ants does this within the colony. And then they basically plant the leaf chunks and use them to grow fungus. And so the fungus is what they actually eat, which they actually feed to the larvae and the other members of the colony. So they're literally farmers. So they invented agriculture about 50 million years ago, long before humans ever showed up. But there's so much involved in actually, just the construction of the nests, because the nests are huge. Then there's a division of labor. And then, of course, they go on these long trails. They actually dig these little roads into the jungle, forest floor. And they have a number of ants that all work together cutting up the leaves. It's not great for the trees, of course. But it's such an incredibly well-developed system. It's really insane. And remember that it's a single queen that is laying all the eggs for all these ants that develop into the various different types of workers within the colony. So how does the colony know how many large workers it needs as opposed to how many smaller workers or nurse ants or whatever, all these different stages? Because there's some types of ants where the job of the ant in the colony will change over the course of the ant's life, right? Maybe they'll start out tending to the larva, and as they grow older, they might develop into a worker and then eventually into a soldier. So ant armies are often made up of little old ladies, because ant workers are sterile females. And it's often the soldiers are the oldest in some species of ants. I think like army ants, I think. Correct me if I'm wrong. But I know it's true for some species of ants. So But if you have like a leaf cutter, like Acromyrmex, where you actually have the ant size is already determined, and there's vastly different sizes between members of the colony, depending on their job. That's a very different thing. Their job is predetermined at birth, basically. So it's very interesting, and it's like whenever I wonder about these things, and just remember, it's like your body is made up of cells. How do your cells know what they're supposed to be doing? How does your liver cells know what they're supposed to be doing right now, as opposed to your pancreas or your lungs or whatever, right? This kind of knowing is a really interesting concept in biology. We tend to anthropomorphize and sort of think of knowing in the sense of our own understanding of our brain's consciousness. So I always find that kind of stuff interesting. And philosophical at the same time. Just remember, your brain is the most important organ in your body according to your brain. I think I'm paraphrasing Emo Phillips there. Okay, so I just added some quick spheres in here for connective tissue, so you can kind of see how that looks. And of course, right now, the topology, we got Dynamesh, we got this kind of stretched sphere, so everything's looking kind of ratty. So now it's time for ZRemesh. So I'm going to save this real quick. And again, I'm not going to worry about doing great topology here because I'm still in the sculpting phase. I just want something that's easier to sculpt, because as Dynamesh is great for sketching things out, but when I want to start straightening lines and smoothing things out, it's nicer to have lower levels of subdivision to allow me to do that. So the smooth brush has more of an impact, and I can move between lower levels and higher levels. So then that's why I like to use ZRemesh at this phase. Way back in the day, I would take this phase into like Maya and use quad draw to do a hand retopology. But now I'm lazy and I'm going to use ZRemesh. So go to ZRemesh. I'm going to turn on keep groups. I think right now this isn't very heavy. It's like 700,000 points for both legs all together. This is 700,000. So that's not much. So I'm going to control click on this right here, the undo history, just to store that so I can project. And then I'll do keep groups. Let's do half, and I'll do ZRemesh. Yeah, happy survival accident. It pretty much describes most of evolution. This story of how, ants are one of my favorite insects. This one actually first got me interested in entomology because they are so incredibly complex. And, how they're social organisms such as ants and honeybees and social wasps, and there's even a social shrimp and a social naked mole rat. How this type of arrangement evolved is a really fascinating story. It's something that's a huge debate among evolutionary biologists. A good example, the debate would be like between like Richard Dawkins and E.O. Wilson would represent two different sides of the debate. How this actually came into being is really interesting stuff. But, some of it gets way over my head. You read about sociobiology and that kind of stuff. When they start getting into mathematical formulas and that kind of thing, that's that Hamilton equation, all that kind of stuff, that's when it starts to get really heavy. But it's cool stuff to learn about. It just goes to show that, evolutionary biology doesn't begin and end with Darwin. It's a constantly changing field of study, and it's very, very complex. And there's a lot of active debates going on in it, if you're into that kind of thing. You can see now I've just simplified those forms using ZRemesh. I probably did a little bit too much because now I'm losing the detail here. So I'm going to undo. Let's go back to this. I think that's enough geometry. It's not great topology by any means, but it's enough to support that level of detail. So I don't think I want to go lower than that. This is something like if I was doing a final version for animation and UV mapping, I would probably do hand retopology just because this kind of detail is going to create nasty spirals. It's going to be difficult to do a nice UV mapping with this topology. So eventually I would probably do hand retopology on that. If this was something that was going to be rigged and animated, I'd do that for sure. Some of these other parts could probably get away with this, but it's not the most efficient use of polygons. Anyways, for right now, I'm just sculpting. So I'm going to Control D to subdivide a few times, get it up to about 3.8 million. Let's go down one level. And I'll do subtool, project history. Don't care about polypaint. And so now we have our projection. So now I can go in here and start to just really refine this. So let's save this guy. And I'm going to get the H polish brush out. And just kind of clean this up a little bit. Not too much. I like the organic feel. Maybe sharpen up these edges here. Yeah, I think the difference between project all and project history is, subtle. Some people think that project history is more accurate than project all. Sometimes I find, I'll experiment with both just to see which works better. The main reason I like project history is because I don't have to duplicate the subtool. If I were to project from an older version. Undo history is one of those things when it first came out. I was like, wasn't super excited about it, but it just gets more and more useful with every iteration of ZBrush. They add more ways that you can use it. The other one is to project history with a morph target, which I haven't used as much as I should. But of course, at this phase, I'm constantly changing my topology, but I think you can still use it even when topology changes. That's one I need to take more advantage of. You can see just getting a little bit cleaner now. And go down a couple levels. Smooth this. It's not quite so wobbly. I like the remnants of the brush strokes on here though, so I'm not going to eliminate them completely because they can create some really kind of cool sort of happy accidents. The other one that I really like is Thick Skin. I'm not going to use it probably too much on this project, but that one's really great when you're doing things like engraving. One of the cool models that I had to do was, it's weird when you do title animation, which is fun work. I like to do it. It's not as glamorous as doing, you know, some of the visual effects in the movies, but it does often give you more creative freedom because you work on smaller teams. And it's kind of fun. So I had to do this pistol from John Wick. I think it was the third one. Maybe it was the fourth one. I forget. But it was this old pistol that had all this kind of cool engraving and skulls and that kind of stuff on it. And that was one of those things where they didn't want to give us, I don't know if they had a digital version of the prop, so they just gave us reference photographs. And I had to sculpt based on the reference photographs. That was really fun. So I used Thick Skin for that to create that kind of engraving, old stool engraving effect. And that was really cool for that. That kind of completely veered off and doing my own version of this now, but I don't care. I think it works. So far, I'm liking this part. This kind of stuff right here, I think is really cool, so I'm gonna leave that. I got a kind of a weird twist going on here, so let's straighten that out. Too much age polish, things start to get a little too flat. One thing I wanted to point out, because we talk a lot about AI on this live stream, and a friend of mine sent me a really cool video, so I'm just going to pull it up real quick. I think it's worth looking at. Just as soon as I can find it. This one right here.
Artificial intelligence.
Hold on a second. Sorry, guys. Right here. This guy's video is really great. I'm not going to turn on the sound right here. Ink and Grow Rich. This guy's a storyboard artist, and you guys don't need to see my history there. It's all politics, anyways. This guy's a storyboard artist, and he does. He goes through the process of comparing his work on an old job with AI, and it's a really good video. And he does a very nice. He's a YouTube personality as opposed to me, who's somebody who just mumbles. So he uses, an old job that he did, and then he uses prompts to see how well AI competes with what he did. And that's a really great video. I highly recommend it. I'll see if we can, I don't know if you can post stuff into the chat here, URLs, but that's a good one to check out. If you're really freaked out, worried about AI, and there's good reason to be, that's a good video to watch because it'll make you feel a little bit, maybe not quite as freaked out. I wouldn't say necessarily optimistic, but maybe not as scared of AI. The name of the channel is Ink and Grow Rich. The name of the video is Can AI Handle a Real Job? I Tested It. And this, I think, a lot of what his test does applies to us VFX guys. I'm not a storyboard artist at all, but it's the same kind of thing. It's like AI is really good at general stuff or spitballing, but terrible at specific things. The minute you start to get specific, it just can't handle it because it can't figure out what you're talking about. And after a few hours of trying to get the prompt right, you'll probably go nuts and decide, hey, I could be faster if I just sculpted this myself. And, you know, anytime you work in the VFX industry and for film, unless it's garbage, the director is going to want something very, very specific. And that's why they hire people who are good at delivering that kind of thing. So maybe for initial concepts and also mood boards and just kind of creating a look and feel, AI can be really useful. But like as he demonstrates, when you say, I need a storyboard of a couch flying through a window, it gets incredibly frustrating because AI can't figure out how to make a couch go through the window. That's a cool one to watch. I just bring it up since we talked a lot about it on this live stream in the past. Go in here with H polish and clean this up a little bit. Yeah, that's pretty much, I think that's, for AI to replace us, clients would need to be very precise with what they want, and that's not going to happen. You know, it's like when I worked on the title sequence for Wednesday, that was a good example. I mean, that's like a Tim Burton thing. So it has to be Tim Burton style exactly. That's what we're trying to go for. Can't be something that's close to Tim Burton or kind of Tim Burton-like. It's something that he's going to look at and say, that represents me or not. And AI is not going to do a very good job of that. Also, I mean, you guys have probably noticed, I mean, like at least with a lot of the sort of AI slop that's out there, it has that certain look. Like I'm getting really, you get really good at spotting that look in images and videos. And I'm already starting to have a negative reaction. There's something about the lighting, the shading that is consistent because I guess the AI model or whatever, but I already have like just a visceral bad reaction to it every time I see it. You know, a good example is like those stupid videos where they show world leaders riding on the mascot of their country or whatever. It's really dumb, in my opinion. It has that look to it that is instantly recognizable. I don't like it. Okay, so I'm going to go in here and work on this just a little bit. I'll give it a texture a little bit that makes it look a bit more like muscle, soft tissue. Right now, I just want to have a better looking shape. You can make it look more sinuous. There's a ZBrush feature that I never use is that, what is it, the spaghetti mesh or whatever they call it? Mesh goo. Slime bridge. I haven't really used that one yet. And I saw Paul was using some really cool what is it? It's somewhere in here. This stuff, mesh balloon, these that you find in the mask palette, I gotta start using that because it has some really interesting effects in there. So right now I kind of have a groove going with this guy. So I know I promised I would do the Lynx spider as well. So I should probably switch to that. But problem is I'm kind of into this at the moment. Let's see this guy. Well, the other thing about AI, though, of course, is I remember back in the late 90s, I was really interested in robotics, not as a professional thing because I can't program to save my life, but just, overall as a phenomena. Back then, it was like the Honda Asimo robot was a big deal, and it couldn't even climb upstairs. It looked cool, but it couldn't really do much. And, everybody was kind of laughing at this thing, saying, oh, it was ridiculous. It barely go upstairs. Or when it finally did go upstairs, people were amazed. Now you look at it, what's going on with the robot dogs and drones and everything, it's not so funny anymore. And the robots are doing parkour. Or if you've seen the Chinese version of the robot dog where they just attached wheels to the legs, and that's like now it's like 5 times faster than the Boston Dynamics robot. And that's like, yo, it's very scary. And I got to actually hang out with one of those a couple of the Boston Dynamics robots at a robot lab in Burbank when I was working on John Brown's movie. And my character got to walk down the hallway with these robots, and those things were just really impressive. Watching it trying to figure out how to open a locked door on its own was really wild. So, point being, it's only been a couple of decades, but robots have increased a lot in their abilities. So it's hard to predict where AI is going to be 10, 15 years from now. And that's when it gets really scary. Yeah, Isaac Asimov was like, but I work so hard on these laws of robotics. It's like, yeah, nobody's paying attention to that, man. It's a nice idea, but not very realistic. Sorry, Isaac. Funny thing about robots is that, the term robot was coined by Karl Čapek, I forget how to pronounce the name, Czechoslovakian playwright who wrote Rossum's Universal Robots. First time the word robot was ever used was in this play. And what was the play about? They made mechanical slaves, and the first thing the slaves did was revolt. So from the very first inception of the concept of robots, it's always been, the whole Bender, hey, sexy mom won't want to kill all humans kind of thing. kind of funny. Many years ago, I was rereading the original Foundation series, and this obviously a great book series. But it's astonishing how much Lucas ripped off from that book for Star Wars. I mean, there's just like to the point where there's like almost literally lines lifted from Foundation. There's a galactic empire. There is a smuggler who's got like the fastest ship in the galaxy. I mean, it's really hysterical. He was kind of shameless. Lucas was, in stealing from that series, but that's showbiz. I'm just sharpening these teeth here real quick. Well, I don't know if that real quick describes the process. Real slow. I'm just using the H polish brush to do this. What I could do is just go down a couple subdivision levels and smooth and pull. Okay, that's a little faster. And then I'll go in here, H polish, and just tighten it up a little bit, but not too much. I'm just polishing this a little bit. H polish is one of my favorite brushes for sure. I just like the way it helps define corners and stuff. I don't really use creasing as much because that's more of a hard surface thing. So instead, I tend to use H polish as a way to create sharpness, but in a very organic way. You get these planes that can reflect light. You can see I'm leaving lots of little messy bits to get the kind of cool texture. Texture and referring to the surface quality, not a texture map. Okay, over here, this needs work because it's all wobbly. Let's save this real quick. Yeah, H polish and trim dynamic are really similar. The difference is kind of subtle, so I think play with them both and see which one you like. for some reason, there's just some slight difference about H polish that I like better. I can't really put it into words as to why, but they are really, really similar. I think it's just a way that if you brushing against two edges, where two edges meet with H polish, it creates just a nice corner there that I like. And you could probably do the same thing with trim dynamic. I mean, there's just a slight difference in the algorithm there. So I'm going down to a lower subdivision level and using the move brush just to straighten this out a little bit to get the wobbles out. And I'll step up. You smooth to create a nicer point there. That's pretty good. Step up again. Use H polish. Oh man, you're very lucky. Taking pictures of scorpions in the desert is super fun, especially with UV lights. I've only done it once. I did it in the deserts of California, but it's a lot of fun. It's really cool when they start glowing bright blue. Yeah, I think there's a few spiders that fluoresce. I remember when I went to bug shot in Mozambique in Gorgosa Park, it was really cool because I was there with a bunch of super nerdy photographers, and we were all out late at night. And we were still on the sort of the campus of the park, but that's still pretty wild. I mean, right outside the fence, you could see glowing eyes staring at you at night and stuff. But there was this tree right next to the E.O. Wilson Biodiversity Center in Gorgosa Park. This tree, it was one of these, what do you call it, like creeping cypresses or something like that. Basically, it was a parasitic plant that had grown over an old tree. The old tree had basically died, and what was left was this lattice of this other tree that had grown around it. So there's all these holes all over it. And it was the most grisly looking thing. I was calling it the Tom Waits tree because it looked like something out of a Tom Waits song or poem or whatever. And in each one of these little holes, there was either a giant scorpion or some kind of tarantula, or there were roommates or something like that. There was just every single hole, and there was hundreds of these holes. There was just some little critter in there, and it was just awesome. Somebody was taking a UV light and flashing against a tree, and the scorpions were lighting up like Christmas lights. It was really hysterical. And we were sitting there for like a good hour, 2 hours, taking pictures of all, close-up pictures of all these cool bugs in this tree. And I remember it was so funny because we heard a noise behind us. We looked behind us, and there was this giant porcupine just a few meters away, just lumbering along, right in there in the park with us. And it just gave us a look like, what are you nerds doing? It was really hysterical. That was just such a fun memory of going out there with the camera and hanging out with bug guys and taking pictures. So yeah, enjoy going out there taking pictures of scorpions. It's a lot of fun. Last time I did that was, I think it was 2019 or so. So it was a long time ago. I went to Anza Borrego Desert in California with bug shot, and we had some spider specialists with us and a lot of scorpions. That was a lot of fun. Right now, here we're nowhere near the desert. I'm right next to the ocean here in France, but I have broken out the camera again, and starting to get back into macro photography. It's been a few years since I really was into it. But luckily, there's lots of cool bugs and spiders and big spiders here in France, believe it or not. So I've been taking pictures in the backyard. And hopefully I can share those when I get around to taking them off the camera and processing them. Scared of spiders? Why would you be scared of spiders? Spiders are your friend. This guy, look, he's friendly. He's an arachnid. Okay, so that looks pretty good. I kind of like it. These might be a little bit thin. Let's take a look at our reference here. Yeah, I think those are a little bit thin, but I like how aggressive these are. This, I think, has a nice S-curve to it, so let's see if we can bring that in here. So a couple of changes I want to make on this real quick. I'm going to shift down, downshift, and just bring this down a little bit so it's not so thin. That's pretty good. And then, yeah, I think that's better. And then here's a cool technique. I mean, I could use the move brush with low Z intensity, but just for the sake of talking about techniques, I'm going to use the gizmo here. I'm going to press O for focal shift and set the focal shift to really high number, like almost 100. When I do that, that creates a fall off for the gizmo. See, so now I can bend using the gizmo, which can be kind of cool sometimes. You can use it like a deformer. What I want to do though is I'm going to make sure that I have everything else masked. And I'll just use this to kind of create my S-curve. So what's going on is the fall off is starting from the center of the gizmo and radiating out. So if I have the fall off almost, up to 80, 90 like this, then I have a pretty strong fall off. And then I can hold the Alt key to position the gizmo. And then you can see how I can pull it almost like a bend deformer. That's just one way to do it. There's a few other ways you can do it as well. I'll move this over here and then push this down again. So now I have an S-curve. And I could even do this where and you can also do it with a rotate. So I could rotate this in here like this. So, little tip. That's the whole point of this, right? So just remember to return the focal shift to minus 100 to get your gizmo to work the way it normally does. That looks pretty cool. So if we're going to do like something like mantis-like, then we would have other teeth right here. So that it would sort of cut in half. You could use this to chomp like a little head off or something like that. Yeah, fear is learned to some extent, but I think there are some fears that are ingrained in human behavior. I think it's a mistake to think that every part of human behavior is learned. That's not how behavior works in other animals, and we do have some ingrained fears. Thank you. I had no fear of spiders until the movie Arachnophobia. Yeah, that movie did give me the creeps. You know, it's a really good one though. Is Kingdom of the Spiders? It's a really old movie, and I think Arachnophobia is making fun of Kingdom of the Spiders. Kingdom of the Spiders stars William Shatner, and I remember seeing it as a little kid on the TV. It was a terrible movie. It's really cheesy, but there's a scene where he actually turns on a water faucet, and instead of water coming out, it's just all these spiders, and I think they're rubber spiders, but it's really hysterical. Thanks, Leo. I appreciate it. I think some fears are more ingrained in others. I think I had more arachnophobia when I was younger. And the more I've learned about spiders, the less fear I have of them. So I'm not saying that I wouldn't jump if I had a giant spider crawling on my shoulder, on my neck, or something like that. I mean, it's still going to startle you. But if I find a spider in my house or my car, I tend not to freak out. I kind of just, my first question is like, what kind of spider is it? I've actually gone in the desert and looked, when I was in Austin, Texas, with a bunch of people. We actually looked for brown recluses, which, by the way, are harder to find than you would think. It's in the name, recluse. The joke is that every spider that you find on the internet is a brown recluse. Everybody's convinced it's a brown recluse. Usually it's not. So I don't know. I don't have as much arachnophobia as I used to. There's only a few bugs that I really, really don't like, and they tend to be mosquitoes and flies and annoying, gross bugs like that. House flies. There's lots of cool flies that are not gross. There's even mosquitoes that don't bite. I don't like, obviously, I don't like the cockroaches that live in your house because they're kind of gross, but they don't scare me. But there are cockroaches that live out in the wild that are actually really cool looking. Scorpions will freak me out if I'm really close to them. Like if I have them in a light box, I'm trying to take a picture. That can freak me out. Big scorpions are really slow though. Small scorpions are fast. What's a really cool one is the, what do you call it? Camel spider? It's not a spider. Those things are freaky. And they're mean. They don't like you. Okay, so let's work on this guy a little bit. This part of the model is something that it seems to vary a lot in the reference. I like the idea of having this as soft tissue. I like the kind of disturbing sphincter-like opening right here, orifice. This is kind of gross and kind of funny. It seems like some of the reference has this joining up with this part, and some other ones have it separate, so I'm going to keep it separate. But I also have to figure out how I'm going to do the part where the legs meet at the bottom. I'm going to create a gap right here, sharpen this a little bit. Let's take a look at the reference here. So you can see this one, it's kind of hard plates on that version. It's Warrior Bug. But this is the one from the movie. This is the one that I like. It's kind of soft tissue. I mean, this is almost like teeth right here. So I like that one. That one's too blurry. It's hard to see. This one I think is also from the movie. It's hard to tell, but it's a little bit different. So this one he has more of a eyebrow, soft tissue, but you don't have that weird, or at least you can't really see them out there. So yeah, every one of them is a little bit different. And some of them have little small appendages coming out, like this right here. I kind of like that, so I might add that. This one has some teeth right there, and hard shell. And then this one looks like it's probably closer. This one looks like it's authentic from the movie. I think this might be the toy. So this one has little spiny teeth. So I like this one. So I think I'm going to go with this. And then but I might add that little appendage because I like that little appendage. Yeah, this one looks very close to the movie. I don't have a credit on it, sorry. And there's some concept art. That might be from the movie. Okay. That's what I'm going with. Yeah, I did do a camel spider model not too long ago. Actually, let's see if we can pull it up. My hard drive wakes up. Wake up. And this one I did just for fun. So this is poly painted. So I'll go in here and I mean, it's like terrifying on the one hand, but also kind of ridiculous on the other. Like the eyes here, I mean, that's just not that frightening, but the mouth is like, yeah, terrifying. Yeah, but this one was a lot of fun. And this was based on pictures that I actually took on one of those desert trips where I had it in a light box. So I got to take a lot of pictures of it, which is really helpful. But it's so incredibly primitive and terrifying looking. Someday I'll, maybe if I get a new 3D printer, I'll do a 3D print of it. Okay, back to this guy. Yeah, the way they move is not fun at all. They come straight at you. Oh yeah, mud dauber wasps are one of my favorite wasps, and I've done something like I did my own version of a mud dauber wasp. It was sort of science fiction like. That was the Gnomon video that I did way back when on insect modeling, kind of based that on a mud dauber wasp. And then I did a live stream one where, but those things are really cool because they have the long skinny tube that connects the abdomen. So this guy, it looks like we actually have sort of this coming down and meeting the legs. Which means maybe what we can do here is move this back a little bit. So I have more space for this leg to meet the body. And this I think is still Dynamesh, yeah, so. And then I'm just going to kind of quickly draw some lines here for where I think I want the legs to meet. And so I'll probably have to come up with some way for this to meet a little bit better. It's too far away. I do sometimes. I've been using Substance more, but yeah, Marmoset is really cool. I like it a lot. Marmoset, I think, has better baking than Substance. At least I think so. It's a little bit easier to control, but I think Substance has better painting tools. So I kind of use a little bit of both sometimes. But I'm going to be perfectly honest with you right now when it comes to texturing. My wife, Irene, is really, really good at Substance and Marmoset. So these days, my texturing workflow involves making UVs from a model and then giving them to her. She's really good at it. She enjoys doing it. She's also a really good ZBrush artist as well. So she's actually a bit more knowledgeable about using sort of a Marmoset Substance ZBrush workflow. She's actually in the process of getting certified as an Unreal artist as well. So we have a lot of stuff going on here in the house. Yeah, the transitions are interesting. I think that's a really good point. So I'm sort of thinking about how to do the transition. Like right here, I kind of like this hard exoskeleton transitioning to soft tissue. But back here, I don't know if that's going to work so much. I think it's going to look too weak if this is just like soft tissue and the legs are coming straight out of it. And in here, it's a little bit nebulous as to how they, like it looks like a hard piece is coming out of the soft tissue. So if you look at, like some flies and ants actually have soft tissue with like harder plates kind of on top of it on the abdomen. Like honeypot ants, when their abdomens expand, you actually see the separation. This is actually true for like some scorpions and some arachnids as well. It's like their body expands and you can actually see the space between the plates. And so I might do something like that here. Sort of borrowing from some of these ideas here. Like back here, it's almost like this is soft and then it gets gradually harder. It is. It's really nice to have someone who you can complain about CG with when software doesn't work, and or all the many things, or watch movies with and critique the CG. She notices some things that I don't notice. It's just kind of fun. And then we can both talk about ZBrush and things like that. It is very nice, actually. The nicest thing is just like collaborating on projects is really cool. It's fun to be able to do that and sort of come up with ideas, because we sort of inspire each other a lot with different ideas that we're coming up with. Also, she's a huge fan of nature and bugs and stuff too. So I'm playing around with some ideas here, just like drawing out potentially maybe some kind of like plates around these. I don't know if I like these, but you gotta start somewhere. I mean, it could sort of like do this kind of thing. Thank you, Mert. Really appreciate it. We could do kind of an overlap here, I guess. Kind of like, I don't know. I'm making this up as I go along, obviously. So let's just pretend that on Clendathu they breed their soldiers and are constantly experimenting with different arrangements genetically. So this is a new model. Oh wow! I hope you got some cool pictures of that. They 3Daos is saying, I got caught on a monsoon at the top of a small mountain this morning. It was neat though, because the small lizards had a feast of all the drowned bugs on the pavement. Watching them dart around and snatching them up the bugs is cool. Yeah, that kind of stuff is awesome. There was I remember when I was in Mozambique, somebody, one of the bug nerds, found a millipede fighting with a colony of ants, and just everybody was just gathered around it, taking pictures and watching for like the longest time. The drama. So we're so spoiled with digital photography, man. I should be taking pictures every day again. I know a lot of people do. It makes it so much. A lot of these bug groups that I used to hang out with and hope to hang out with them again someday soon. You have some really old school people in there, and they'll tell you horror stories of what it was like to actually have to take macro photography of bugs with an old style camera and not know what you got until you actually had the film developed. It's just like, I can't imagine how expensive the hobby was then, because, I have to take, 30 pictures for like 3 to come out good. Yeah, I mean, I'm even usable. Most of the pictures are just blurry, worthless images of an ant's butt running away into a leaf or something like that. So I can only imagine what it was like back then. Okay, I don't know if I like this or not. Let's take a look. It's kind of interesting. I mean, there's something interesting about this sort of crisscross right here in the profile between this part of the leg and then this thing. And this sort of accidentally extends this line right here. So maybe, I don't know, that's kind of cool. Oh yeah, the MPE 65 millimeter, that's supposed to be like practically like a microscope, isn't it? At the end of your, if I'm thinking of the right lens, I don't have anything that fancy, but it's a very, from what I understand, that lens takes some practice to get to use really well. Like only the eye of the ants focus. Yeah, I've heard. I know people have used that lens and they really love it, but it's super macro. I'm going to bring in some of these disgusting folds. I do like the way they have these like teeth here, so I'm going to bring these in. But I think I'm going to wrap this up in a couple minutes here for this evening and continue this next week. I'm sorry I didn't get to the link spider tonight, but I kind of was enjoying what I was doing and I didn't want to stop what I had going. Maybe next week I'll lead with that one. I also have a longhorn beetle that is still a work in progress that I need to get back to. get him an angry eye. Do I have eyes in here? Real quick, I'm gonna throw in some eyes. There we go. Okay. Yeah, it's looking pretty good. I kind of like that. I have to connect up the legs. This guy's probably just too far away. Alrighty. I can't remember, but I think what I did is I have narration throughout the entire Orchid Mantis tutorial on the Noma Workshop. There are parts I think where I sped up like maybe 2 or 3 times the video because I record those things with Camtasia. So if I remember correctly, I don't think I did a straight up time lapse. I think I just sped up the video at some points. But I believe that I have narration throughout. So I'd have to double. I haven't watched it in years, so, but I think it's not. It's mostly real time. Like I do take the time to explain things. I don't like things that are just time lapse, where, with the exception of like YouTube videos. Sometimes I'll do YouTube videos just straight up time lapse. But if I'm recording an actual tutorial, I like to actually talk when I'm doing it, so that you're getting more out of it than just watching somebody sculpt. Do I have any ZBrush tips of things not to do? Don't talk to people who use Blender. No, I'm just kidding. Oh wow, Gila Monster, that's cool. Sorry, I'm reading some of the comments out of order here. Yeah, there's lots of stuff that you don't want to do in ZBrush, but I might have to cover that next time. But part of it is philosophy. Like one of the things I would say with ZBrush is don't think of ZBrush as a linear workflow. How about that? Don't think of ZBrush as starting from point A to go to point B to point C to point D, like that kind of pipeline. ZBrush is totally non-linear. You can go around in circles. Dynamesh, ZRemesh, Sculptress to Dynamesh again, back to ZRemesh. You can just keep doing it and working it over and over again until you have what you want. And you don't have to use every tool in ZBrush. I would say don't try and do too much at once. Start with your core basic 5 things and build slowly over time. Expand your tool set. And don't worry about the things that in ZBrush that you never use. There's some things that I never use. Like I said earlier tonight, every once in a while you get reminders like, oh yeah, that tool exists. I forgot about it. That's fine. But you want to just basically sculpt first and worry about all the fancy stuff later. Yeah, I mean Blender is cool. I'm kidding when I joke about Blender. I think that that I'm getting into Blender right now because it's more and more people are using it. It's becoming a serious part of the pipeline. I'm not crazy about spending so much money on my licenses every year. So I'm embracing Blender, and some of the sculpting stuff is cool. But I still like the animation rigging tools in Maya much better. Cool, guys. Thanks so much for joining me tonight. It was really enjoyed talking to you all and getting your input. I'll pick this up next week and hopefully get back to my link spider. Here he is, just in case you're free. Now he's so lonely. Look at how lonely he looks. It's like you're supposed to play with me and you didn't. I'm sorry, man. I got into the sci-fi thing. I sold out. Okay, cool. See you guys next week. Yeah, you know why there's a hatred of Blender? It's their attitude. For some reason, Blender artists, they feel like they're acting like they're Occupy Wall Street or something like that. You know, it's like, yes. And a lot of times when they're discovering something with their software, it's like, yeah, that's stuff that we've had for years. And I know we feel like you've reinvented CG and all this kind of stuff, but, you know, get over it. All right, guys. See you next week.